turn on your microphone when speaking so that virtual attendees can hear you. For members attending virtually, please remember to unmute your device before speaking and mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. Phone participants should use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise their hand. Lisa, please proceed with the roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please respond. Danae Pressler.
This is Marshall Pimentel sitting in for Danae Pressler.
Thank you, Marshall. Robert Vondenacker.
Present.
Thank you. John Sherrill.
Present.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda.
Present.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Present. Here.
Thank you. Hondo Judd. Chris Bridges.
I'm here.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro.
Present.
Thank you. Rhonda Humbles.
Here.
Thank you. Matthew Potzler.
Present.
Thank you. Scott DeBias.
Present.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
Here.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Present.
Thank you. Jonathan Fudge.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. John Woods. Christina Hopez.
I'm sorry. This is John Woods for Christina Hoppes. I just have a problem finding the mute button.
Thank you, John. Walter Bouchard. Amanda McGinnis. Beverly Chanowski.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson. Mike Denby.
Michael Denby is here.
Thank you. Steve Trussell. J.C. Porter.
Present.
Thank you. Dave Barry. Ed Stillings. Spencer Camps. Kim Butler.
I'm here.
Thank you. Liz Foster.
Here.
Thank you. Stan Ballone. Kristen Watt.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa. Mike Chamberlain.
Present.
Thank you. Robert Forrest. Susie Stevens. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Lisa. A quorum is now present. The meeting of the MAG Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee is now called to order. Thank you for attending today's meeting. Copies of today's meeting agenda packet are available on the information table in the hallway. The presentation is posted on the MAG website under today's Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee meeting. The MAG public comment process provides opportunities for members of the public to comment on items scheduled on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. Opportunities are provided for public comment under call to the audience and action items. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website prior to the meeting, as long as the comments are received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway. Please be sure to indicate the item for which you want to speak and give it to a designated MAG staff member. If you parked in the garage, remember to validate your ticket. Parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. For those who purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Please note that hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Moving on to agenda item number 2, call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction, that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Members of the public who are attending in person may deliver their comments from the lectern at the front of the room. You have up to 3 minutes to complete your comments. A timer is provided to assist you. When the light on the timer turns from green to yellow, you have 1 minute remaining. If the light turns red, a buzzer will sound, meaning your allotted time has expired. Have MAC staff received any speaker cards?
Madam Chair, we did not receive any speaker cards.
Thank you. MAC also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments prior to the meeting, as long as the comments are received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. Do we have any written comments at this time?
Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 3, approval of the April 26, 2022 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, prior to taking a vote on agenda item number 3, staff, do we have any speaker cards for this item or any written comments?
Madam Chair, we do not have any speaker cards or written comments.
Very good, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the April 26, 2022 meeting minutes?
This is Ramona Simpson, Town of Queen Creek. I will move to approve.
Thank you, Ramona. Do I have a second?
This is Scott Tobias with Pinal County. I second.
Thank you, Scott. So we have a motion from Ramona Simpson and a second from Scott Tobias. We will do the voting in 2 steps. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Those who wish to abstain from the vote, say abstain. And now we will move to a roll call vote of all members participating virtually. And Lisa Young will take that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Danae Pressler.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Vondenacker.
Approved.
Thank you. John Sherrill.
Aye.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda.
Aye.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Aye.
Thank you. Chris Bridges.
I'm going to abstain. I was not present.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro.
Aye.
Thank you. Rhonda Humbles. Rhonda
Aye.
Humbles. Thank you. Scott Tobias.
Aye.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
Aye.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Abstain.
Thank you. Jonathan Futch.
Abstain.
Thank you. John Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Walter Bouchard. Amanda McGinnis. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. Mike Denby.
Aye.
Thank you. J.C. Porter.
Aye.
Thank you. Kim Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Liz Foster.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa. Mike Chamberlain.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Forrest. Susie Stevens. Did I miss anyone? One moment, please. Madam Chair, we have 21 ayes, 3 abstentions.
Thank you, Lisa. The minutes are approved. Moving on to agenda item number 4, draft MAG on-road mobile source emission reduction targets for Cmac projects. This will be presented by Matt Poppin of Maricopa Association of Governments.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Today, we will be providing a presentation on, next slide, please. You can pull that up. On the draft MAG on-road mobile source emission reduction targets for congestion mitigation and air quality improvement projects. And we will also be asking the committee to recommend approval of these targets. Next slide, please. So just for some background on why these targets are required, back in 2017, the Federal Highway Administration developed a series of rules that established performance measures for use by State Department of Transportation and MPOs. So under these rules, DOTs and MPOs are required to establish targets that make progress towards some national goals of safety, infrastructure, congestion reduction, system reliability, freight movement, economic vitality, environmental sustainability, and reduced project delivery time. So the Cmac program is one of those programs that falls under these performance measures and goals. Next slide, please. So the on-road mobile source emissions reduction measure is specific to congestion mitigation and air quality improvement program projects. And we are required to develop 2-year and 4-year emission reduction targets for measuring progress against that measure. And how performance is measured is by taking the cumulative reductions that are reported in the Cmac annual report by the various ozone EPA standard non-attainment areas where these projects take place. So for us, we have a carbon monoxide maintenance area, an ozone non-attainment area, and particulate matter non-attainment areas. Next slide, please. Wanted to provide this graphic, which kind of gives some overview of the timelines of these goals and targets and how they work. I do want to point out that we are now in the second performance period. And so these targets we're establishing and recommending today are for the second performance period. Back in 2018, the committee established targets for the first performance period, and the dark represented by the darker graphics on there. We're in the lighter period. Next slide, please. So as I stated, emission reduction targets for the first performance period were recommended for approval by the Air Quality Committee on March 22nd, 2018. So the targets presented today are for the second performance period, which covers fiscal years 2022 through 2025. And these targets must be reported to the Federal Highway Administration by October 1st, 2022. So these targets were developed in close coordination with Arizona Department of Transportation. And because ADOT also has to submit statewide emission reduction targets, they may use our targets to establish statewide targets. Next slide. So the on-road mobile emission reduction targets for this second performance period were developed by MAG based upon the anticipated emission reductions of TIP program Cmac projects in fiscal years 2022 through 2025. We already know what those projects are. They have been programmed and included in the TIP. So we're taking the emission reductions from those projects as the basis for these targets. Because there can be some uncertainties associated with the deployment of those projects and at what time they may actually obligate, we reduced those anticipated emissions by 15% to account for future uncertainties in those projects. Next slide, please. So this slide lists some of the uncertainties that may affect those anticipated emission reductions. So we have the decline in mobile source emissions that happen due to stricter vehicle emission standards and fleet turnover. EPA often changes the way they calculate emissions. They develop new models, so that can change the anticipated emission reductions that we currently have. Changes in the economy can delay or move up projects. and changes to specific Cmac project funding can change. And then when those projects actually get reported in the annual report, sometimes can change year by year depending on when they actually got obligated. So to account for these uncertainties, these anticipated emissions were reduced by 15% to make sure the project targets are met. Next slide, please. So here are the targets. The top two rows are the actual targets listed in bold. And we have targets for 5 pollutants, nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, carbon monoxide, PM10 and PM2.5. So the 2-year target is for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. And then we have the 4-year target, which is for fiscal years 2022 through 2025. And that does include the emission reductions assumed for that 2-year target. Below are those anticipated emission reductions I spoke about earlier that the targets are based upon. So based on the current Cmac projects that are in the tip, this is what we anticipate the emission reductions will be if there are no changes. None of those uncertainties come to bear. This is what the emissions would be. So you can see the 2-year total, for example, for NOx is 463.402 kilograms per day. A 15% reduction in that gets you the NOx target of 393.892 kilograms per day. I do want to mention that these, the way this program is set up, these targets are not meant to be aspirational targets. They are meant to reflect the projects that are being implemented and expected to be implemented. So you wouldn't want to set these targets without knowing what the projects are ahead of time. That's not what FHWA is intending by this. They're not meant to be aspirational targets. Next slide. And I had mentioned earlier that we're in the second performance period. So this table just provides you an opportunity to see what the targets were for the first performance period versus the second performance period. They're all about the same order of magnitude, the same scale. So the second performance period targets, which we are asking for a recommendation on today, are in bold. And then the performance target periods for the first period are listed underneath in the lighter font. So that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions before we ask for a recommendation.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions here in the room? Okay, seeing none, I will pause and ask for any questions from the virtual attendees.
Hi there, this is Marshall with Avondale. Again, I'm sitting in as proxy for Danae Pressler, and she had 2 questions she wanted me to ask. The first one is, do the trends in electric vehicle adoption factor into the emission reduction targets?
So the emission reduction targets are based on the Cmac projects that are already approved. And I don't know if you've been a part of this committee for a while, you know we bring those projects through and ask for committee approval. They're all types of projects. They can be paving a dirt road, a bike and ped project. So these are very specific projects that end up getting incorporated into the tip. I don't believe there are any projects currently associated with electric vehicles in this particular, like for example, one project could be an electric vehicle charging station. I don't believe any of those, we're not using Cmac funds for that project. So electric vehicles wouldn't really come into play for this particular performance period.
Thank you. And that actually goes right into the second question too. Are electric vehicle charging infrastructure projects eligible for Cmac funding? Or would that only be if they were already approved?
Well, for this, we're looking at the projects that are already approved. And we will be bringing more Cmac projects through the committee. And member agencies have a chance to recommend Cmac projects. We send out letters asking for recommendations, but that'll be later on. And I can double check for you on electric vehicle charging stations if they're allowed to receive Cmac funds. I believe they are, but I can double check on that for you and send out an email just to be sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions for this agenda item? Okay, hearing none. Prior to taking a vote on agenda item number 4, staff, do we have any speaker cards for this item or any written comments?
Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So is there a motion to recommend approval of the draft MAG on-road mobile source emission reduction targets for Cmac projects for the second performance period?
Tim Connor, so moved.
Thank you, Tim. Could I get a second?
This is John Sherrill, a second.
Thank you, John. So we have a motion from Tim Connor and a second from John Sherrill. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. And those who wish to abstain from the vote say abstain. And now we will move into the roll call vote of all members participating virtually. And this will be taken at this time by Lisa Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Marshall Pimentel.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Vondenacker.
Aye.
Thank you. John Sherrill.
Aye.
Thank you.
Amanda McGinnis joined the meeting.
Derek Castaneda.
Aye.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Aye.
Thank you. Megan Sheldon. Chris Bridges.
Aye.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro.
Aye.
Thank you. Rhonda Humbles.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Tobias.
Aye.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
Aye.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Jonathan Futch.
Abstain.
Thank you. John Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Abstain.
Thank you. Mike Denby.
Aye.
Thank you. J.C. Porter.
Aye.
Thank you. Spencer Camps.
Aye.
Thank you. Kim Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Liz Foster.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Aye.
Thank you. Michael Chamberlain.
Aye.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? One moment, please.
Lisa, this is Amanda McGinnis and I'm an aye.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we have 23 ayes and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, Lisa. The motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 5, update on planning efforts for the moderate non-attainment area plan for the 2015 ozone standard. Matt Poppin with Maricopa Association of Governments will provide the presentation.
Thank you again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Next slide, please. So just, we presented on this last month, but just to remind everyone, back on April 13th, 2022, EPA did publish a notice proposing to reclassify 31 marginal non-attainment areas for the 2015 ozone standard. And the Maricopa 8-hour ozone non-attainment area was one of those areas that did not meet the standard by the August 3rd, 2021 attainment date, and also did not qualify for a 1-year extension of the attainment date. EPA is therefore proposing to reclassify the region from marginal to moderate. If they finalize this, a moderate area state implementation plan is due to EPA by January 1st, 2023. And comments on this proposal are due by June 13th, 2022. Next slide, please. So we want to review and provide you with an update on the progress to date so far on responding to this reclassification by going over the moderate area requirements and letting you know where things stand so far. So in review, attainment must be demonstrated by August 3rd, 2024. And since that attainment date is in the middle of the summer, the plan is required to demonstrate actually in the prior 2023 ozone season. So we'll be looking at ozone monitoring data from 2021 through 2023 to evaluate whether attainment is made by that August 3rd, 2024 attainment date. The plan is also required to show a 15% reduction in VOC emissions over a 6-year period. This is the reasonable further progress requirement. Beginning 2017 will be the base year for those emissions. And then you have reductions in the 6 years following. The plan is required to include reasonably available control technology, or RACT. And the plan is also required to include reasonably available control measures. This requires that an area adopt all measures, including RACT, to meet the RFP requirements and to demonstrate attainment as quickly as possible, as expeditiously as practical. And then also another big key requirement is contingency measures. So these are going to be new measures that are ready to be triggered if the area fails to attain or make reasonable further progress. Next slide, please. So we kind of wanted to go through these requirements in detail so you understand what's involved with them. So the requirement for RACT is a Clean Air Act requirement, and this requirement is independent of what is needed for attainment. So regardless if current controls are sufficient to show attainment, an area has to meet RACT, regardless of the emission reductions associated with implementing RACT. And EPA defines RACT as the lowest emission limitation that a particular source is capable of meeting by the application of control technology that is reasonably available, considering technological and economic feasibility. RACT is specific in what it applies to. So it applies to stationary sources only of VOC and NOx. It applies to all major sources, which for a moderate area is 100 tons per year of either VOC or NOx. And it also applies to stationary sources of VOC or NOx for which EPA has issued these specific guidance documents. So these are categories of emissions, like solvents and coatings and those type of things. So EPA has several of those that are issued as well. So that brings in minor sources as well as major sources of emissions. Next slide, please. So EPA states that RACT can change over time, so it has to be current. So as part of that, EPA encourages the states to review rules in other states to help determine what is current, what is considered RACT. So as part of that, Maricopa County Air Quality Department and the Pinal County Air Quality Control District, since there is a portion of the non-attainment area that is in Pinal County, are in the process of reviewing their stationary source rules to see if they meet RACT requirements, and they're busy doing that currently. RACT submittals are due the same time the plan submittal is due, January 1st, 2023. And they can be submitted as part of the plan, or they can be submitted separately and referred to in the plan. So there's a couple different options there. And this time around, any anticipated and verifiable emission reductions achieved through RACT may be modeled as part of the attainment demonstration. The committee may remember we went through a RACT analysis when the area was bumped up to moderate for the 2008 ozone standard. This was back in 2016. At that time, we knew existing controls were sufficient to demonstrate attainment within the non-attainment area, so no emission reductions were taken for that RACT analysis. This time around, it's likely that we'll be seeking to take emission reductions that will be achieved through what the RACT analysis identifies. Next slide, please. Moving on to RACM. So RACM is broader than RACT. RACM encompasses RACT, but it's broader. So the Clean Air Act defines this as you have to include provisions that shall provide for the implementation of all reasonably available control measures as expeditiously as practicable, so as quickly as you can, and that these are designed for attainment. So we're looking at measures that will bring us into attainment of the standard. Additionally, this is a new requirement for the 2015 ozone standard that didn't exist for implementation of the 2008 standard. EPA is requiring that the state shall submit with the attainment demonstration a supervision demonstrating that it has adopted all RACM necessary to demonstrate attainment. And the SHIP shall include, as applicable, other control measures on sources of emissions of ozone precursors located outside the non-attainment area or portion thereof located within the state if doing so is necessary or appropriate to provide for attainment of the applicable ozone standard in such area. So the new portion is this idea of evaluating sources outside the non-attainment area to see if they have an impact on the attainment status within the Maricopa non-attainment area. Now, if you can show that you can demonstrate attainment without having to evaluate sources outside, that's fine, then you don't have to evaluate. But if you're struggling to show attainment, then you do have to look at the emission impacts, the ozone impacts that sources located outside the non-attainment area, but within Arizona have on the area. This is a new, like I said, this is a new requirement that EPA has implemented for the 2015 ozone standard. We didn't have to do this for the 2008 one. Next slide. Some more guidance from EPA. In order to meet RAC, we have to adopt all reasonable measures, including RACT, to meet it as to demonstrate attainment. So everything that's needed to demonstrate attainment needs to be adopted, and that will get us there as quickly as possible. A state must also demonstrate that there are no additional measures that are reasonably available that will advance the attainment date by at least 1 year. That one is pretty much off the table because that would mean showing attainment in this year, in 2022. We know we won't have any new rules in place that will affect this summer. So there's nothing the state can do to advance the attainment date by 1 year, given how closely we are submitting this plan to the attainment date. There's nothing we can do that will affect the ozone season with new regulations in 2022 that will have a meaningful impact in time. EPA guidance also requires that states shall consider all available measures, including those being implemented in other areas, but must adopt measures for an area only if these measures are economically and technologically feasible and will advance the attainment date or are necessary for reasonable further progress. So again, EPA encourages us to look at the measures that other states are using as part of this RACM analysis. Next slide, please. Some overall thoughts on RACM again. This is going to be the heart of the plan in a lot of ways. RACM is very broad and applies to both stationary and mobile sources. One thing to remember is we are not a new non-attainment area. As you've heard us talk to the committee before, we already have 93 local, state, and federal ozone control measures in place. So there aren't a lot of new measures out there that we don't already implement currently within the non-attainment area. There might be some incremental differences, but a lot of that low-hanging fruit per se has already been implemented and is in place. So what the current RACM analysis is doing right now is involves completing a crosswalk between the emission sources and the existing regulations. So we're taking a look at that 2017 base year inventory, seeing out of all of those emission sources, how are they regulated? Are there some sources that aren't currently regulated? That kind of gives you a basis for then performing this RACM analysis. It's possible that this final RACM analysis may result in a list of suggested measures needed for attainment for consideration by implementing entities. This is a process the committee is somewhat familiar with. The RACM analysis would list a bunch of measures that are out there that are available, hopefully with cost data, with economic impact data, with emission reductions data, and then the implementing entities, which could be the counties, the cities, or whoever might be subject to those regulations, can then see if they're economically and technologically feasible for adoption. One other thing to think about is because we do need new measures for contingency, we can't use existing measures that maybe are identified in the RACM analysis but aren't adopted. Those could be candidates for contingency measures. So that's one thing to think about as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we are doing currently for attainment modeling and reasonable further progress, the MAG modeling staff is working really hard to test a bunch of different modeling scenarios to see where we're at in terms of attainment and meeting that 15% reasonable further progress goal. So they're revising and producing new modeling emissions inventory for the years of 2017, which is our base year for RFP, looking at 2020 as well as a possible modeling year, and then 2023, which is the attainment year. They're testing the appropriateness of using 2017 or 2020 as the base year for modeling and how best to project 2023 emissions. EPA feedback is involved in this process as well. And they're also running sensitivity analyses to determine which emission sources are significant in terms of impacting the attainment demonstration and how much emission reductions are needed to demonstrate attainment in 2023. So the result of all of those efforts will result in a modeling protocol that will be shared to EPA and to the committee, showing the way that we'll try and demonstrate attainment with the 2023 or by the attainment date. Next slide, please. Part of that effort is we have to account for ozone exceedances affected by wildfires. We know we have had a lot of those since largely 2017. And they significantly raise the design value when those are left in. For example, our current design value, which is the years of 2019 through 2021, is 80 parts per billion. So that's 10 parts per billion over the standard when wildfires are left in. When wildfires are excluded, that design value drops anywhere between 75 to 73 parts per billion, depending on those list of wildfires that end up being considered as strong enough to be excluded. So the process of excluding those, there's kind of two pathways. You can do it through the exceptional event documentation, which is pretty laborious and takes a lot of work. But EPA also has this additional guidance document, which allows you to exclude them just for modeling purposes, which is most likely the path we will take. It doesn't require the same amount of data that you would need in a full-blown exceptional event documentation. So currently MAG, along with ADEQ, Maricopa County and Pinal County are finalizing a list of these ozone exceedance states affected by wildfires. Once we have those, we'll share those with the committee, and we'll be sharing those with EPA as well to determine, one, how much information is needed from EPA in order for us to reasonably exclude those, and just to get their feedback on it as well. In terms of developing exceptional event documentation, we would really only be doing that for years 2021 moving forward, because again, we're interested in showing attainment for the period of 2021 through 2023. So if we're getting close to showing attainment and it makes sense to submit those exceptional event documentation, then we'll develop exceptional event documentation for those years of 2021 through 2023. We want to take a little bit of time and see what 2022 looks like before investing resources, because it does take a lot of resources. If you remember, we shared with the committee in the past the Lake Fire. That was almost an 18-month process to get that approved. So that was just one fire. So that was a very difficult fire. Some of them are much more obvious, but still takes a lot of resources. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I did want to mention Clean Air Act Section 179B. Clean Air Act Section 179B does provide an option to prepare a demonstration that an area will meet or would have met the attainment date, but for international emissions. If EPA approves a 179B demonstration, the non-attainment area cannot be reclassified to a higher, stricter classification. So for us, for our non-attainment area, the example would be if we submit a 179B demonstration saying EPA, we would have met the standard except for emissions from Mexico. Then and EPA accepts it, then they would leave us at a moderate non-attainment area. They would not bump us up to serious if we fail to meet that August 3rd, 2024. All of the other requirements still remain in place, so you still have to be rack them, and pretty much everything else, but it does prevent the area from being bumped up to higher classifications, which come with more stricter controls. We've had some initial conversations with EPA about what they're looking for, and they've pointed us to their guidance in a 179B demonstration. So here are some of the main things they are looking for in a compelling demonstration and one that they would approve. They want to see that the contribution from local or from international emissions is greater than the contribution from local domestic emissions. They also want to see that international transport is significantly different on exceedance days compared to non-exceedance days. So you can really point out the difference and really point to those transport emissions. And they also want to see that the transport was significant quantities to cause the exceedance. So these are some pretty high bars for us to get over in order to submit a compelling demonstration, especially that first bullet. Local emissions do tend to be larger than international emissions. So that is one that is difficult to get over. That's probably the biggest hurdle out of all of these that EPA has let us know ahead of time. So currently we're focused on the normal traditional attainment demonstration. That's what our modeling is focused on. Because we think we have a much better chance of showing that than a 179B demonstration at this point. We will, of course, continue to reevaluate as more information comes in, as more technical information comes in, but that's where we are currently. Next slide, this is my last slide. So the schedule. On top of all of that, we have a deadline of January 1st to get the plan in, and normally to meet the MAG kind of committee schedule, a draft plan would need to be available in September or October of this year. That's an extremely tight deadline, given the fact that we're likely going to be looking at a variety of different measures. And so that's going to be a hard timeline to meet. And one of those things, here are a couple of reasons why that's going to be hard to meet. The need for an identification of new control measures, even just identifying contingency measures, is very difficult because they have to be new measures. Looking at the availability and approvability of modeling approaches, EPA is going to be very specific with us on what they want to approve, and then the work needed to exclude wildfire exceedances. So all of those things make it very difficult to get a plan out and ready for review for public comment. Of course, we'll shoot for that, but it is a very aggressive timeline. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions or comments the committee has.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions here in the room? Okay, any questions from those participating virtually? Okay, hearing none, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 6 is the request for future agenda items. Do I have any requests by membership for an item to place on a future agenda? Okay, hearing none. We have reached the end of the meeting agenda. So business is now concluded. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Tim Connor, so moved.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.